Our sermon today is taken from 1 Samuel chapter 28 and chapter 29. Chaos is king. A few weeks ago, I preached a sermon entitled Trouble on Every Hand. This is the second part on chaos. Trouble is usually personal problems. But chaos is much bigger. Chaos is on a national level. And so we're seeing here that the country is on the verge of civil war. Now, I pointed this out concerning Israel. Now, today I want to zero in and I want to talk about chaos in our country. We look at verses 1 and 2 of chapter 28. Now it came about in those days that the Philistines gathered their armed camps for war to fight against Israel. And Achish said to David, "Know surely that you will go out with me in the camp, you and your men." And David said to Achish, "Very well, you shall know what your servant can do." So Achish said to David, "Very well, I will make you my bodyguard forever." Now David is getting ready to go to war against his own people. So when you have two armies from the same nation fighting one another, you have civil war. I'm going to read a quote from one of the world leaders. And this is what he said. He sent a warning to the United States. This happened a little over a week ago. This is what he said. Quote, "Save your country now before it is too late." And then he summed up his warning to the United States. And this is also a quote. "America is in a sad, sorry state." Do you ever remember anybody, any nation in the world talking to us like that? Wake up before it's too late because you're in a sad, sorry state. Civil war comes as a result of division. Let me illustrate. June is Gay Pride Month. Now we have one day for Mother's Day. We have one day for the veterans. We have one day to celebrate our independence for the 4th of July. But now we've got a whole month to celebrate the gay movement. This creates great division. Now, so there are two holidays in the month of June. You got Father's Day. And now we got Pride Month. So Pride Month is smothering out, honoring fathers who are the backbone of the family. And the family is the backbone of the nation. How can this be? A nation that was founded by God and for the glory of God. And now we're turning it over to a group who is out to destroy the family and the nation. Now the baseball teams have got on board with Gay Pride Month. And the players, professional baseball players, are wearing logos. logos of the gay movement. And the Detroit Tigers have gone a step further. The Detroit Tigers has announced that it will donate money for boys who want to have a sex gender operation to become girls. The man said, "Wake up. You're in a sad, sorry condition." I want to say a few words about communism. Communism program is, first of all, to destroy a nation and then to enslave it. Now, I want to ask a question. What is the difference between communism and the Democratic Party? People say, I'm a Democrat, but I'm also a Christian. What does communism say about God? Communist says there is no God. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but this is a true statement. What is the official position of the Democratic Party about God? If you know, nod your head or raise your hand. The official position of the Democratic Party is there is no God. So people who say, I am a Democrat and I am a Christian, they got some serious matters that they need to work out. That's like saying, I'm a Christian, but I go to a satanic church to worship. The Democratic Party says exactly what communism said. Everywhere communism is in control, there are no guns for the people. I think everyone knows that. What is the official position of the Democratic Party concerning guns? Take them away for your own safety. I want to read this quote from one of the leaders of our nation today. Here's the quote. We will completely end democracy to save democracy. We will not rest until you are disarmed and under our complete control to do to you whatever we want to do to you and to your family whenever we feel like it. In other words, I'm saying that the Democratic Party is a carbon copy of communism. Now, the Democratic Party today is not the Democratic Party of years past. It has changed, and if you have not kept up with it, then you are blind as to what is going on. The Communist Party intends to destroy a nation and then to enslave it. Did you hear what one of our U.S. senators said this week? It's a short quote. The worst is yet to come. In other words, we're not out to solve problems. It's getting worse. The national leader says, wake up, America, and save yourself before it is too late. Have you asked yourself, why we do not hear the word impeach? When Trump was president, you heard the word impeach every day from the day that he was elected. Has anybody heard the word impeach? Why? Because our government is not out to improve things, but its goal is to destroy this nation. And then after it is destroyed, then to enslave it so that we can do to you whatever we want to do. Have you ever asked yourself the question, why doesn't the mainstream media tell us these things? And why do they water things down and refuse to tell us things that we need to know? Because the mainstream media is part of the group that is out to destroy our nation. Why don't we close the southern border? Because an open southern border is a means of destroying our nation. And there is no attempt to close it. Do you remember just a few years ago, it was quite common for a family to buy a half of beef and put it in the freezer, or to buy a whole hog and put it in the freezer? Are those are the days of the past? For most, it is. Now it's just being able to buy groceries for a week, or even less. Are you aware that there's a march coming towards the southern border of illegal immigrants? Are you aware that they're coming? It's a large 15,000 of them. I bet you didn't hear this on the news, but they are reporting because there are people who have mingled with this group to find out what this group is made of. One is there are many AK-47s in this group of 15,000 people crossing the border. See, they're out to take away our guns, but to give these poor people who can't have money to even buy a .22 carrying an AK-47. America, wake up before it is too late. Another thing, I think you have probably seen on TV, most of the people who are in this march are military-age men. There are very few women and very few children, but they want us to believe that's what it's made up of. And it's been this way from the beginning. The swamp is in control, and the swamp is out to destroy this nation so that they can enslave this nation. All the countries of the world who have gun control which means they have no guns. And by the way, let me say this. We remembered Tiananmen Square, I believe it was 20 years ago. It was college kids in China. They were crying out for their freedom. They had no guns. But they met in this public square, and they was asking China to give them their freedom. You remember the story? Here came the tanks, and here came the machine guns, and they shot them down, and they ran over them with the tank, just to remind them, we control you. You have no freedom. The countries of this world who have no guns, they say, if we could have one statement out of the U.S. Constitution, we would ask that we would have the freedom to bear arms. They would take that above everything else. If there is no arms, there is no freedom. One of the police departments in a nearby state made this announcement this week. They said, due to the fact that we have already spent our year's budget on gasoline, we now will not be able to answer all 911 calls. We will have to pick and choose what we think is the most important. And remember what our senator said this week. The worst is yet to come. One nation under God unites that nation. A nation that throws out God is a nation that has opened itself up to civil war. Did you know that they have now proven that the leaders of Black Lives Matter, every one of them is a devout communist? The Constitution protects everyone. We're in a society where we pick and choose who we want to show favoritism to. Black Lives Matter divides the nation. It does not unite the nation. There was about to be civil war. And David has got himself in a jam. He is about ready to go to war with his people. All right, the second thing that I want to bring out is David made a bad decision in the time of chaos. Look at verse 2. And David said to Achish, very well, you shall know what your servant can do. He was planning to go to war with his own people, that civil war. Now God had promised David that he would be the next king. And David was somewhere around 13, 14 years old when he was anointed king. Now he's going to war against the people that will crown him king. If the Philistines win the battle, the people will reject David from becoming king. If David and his army wins the battle, or if Israel wins the battle, the people will reject David from becoming king. So he is in a situation he cannot win. It was a no-win situation for David. Let me say this. In a time of crisis or in time of a chaos, do not make hasty decisions. For an example, if you have lost a spouse, don't make hasty decisions about your future. You do have to make decisions, but consult godly people for advice in that time. The Bible says that we're not to walk in the counsel of the ungodly. So be careful who you go to talk to in time of a crisis when you have to make a decision. I don't have to tell you this, but to avoid those people who are out to put their hand in your pocket in the time of a crisis, because there's plenty of them. So David is in a situation where he cannot get out of it. God used the generals of the Philistine army to get David out of his dilemma. Let me ask you a question. And I'm going to ask it, and you respond. There is no correct answer. There is no wrong answer. When you had an insolvable problem, did God solve it the way you thought he would? Or did God solve it altogether different from what he thought it was? All right. So I want you to shake your head. When you had a great big problem and you did not know how to solve it, and it was it solved the way you thought it was going to be? Shake your head if that's you. All right. If you had a great big problem and you did not know how to solve it, and it was solved in a way that you did not expect, shake your head. That's usually the way it goes. I didn't see any head shaking on the first one. Now, we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how we're going to solve problems. Our job is to trust God. Let's turn to Romans chapter 11. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. God has many ways to solve our problems. And most of the time he solves it in such a way that we never dreamed it would go that way. Romans chapter 11. Beginning with verse 13 and 33. Oh, the depths of the riches, both of the wisdom and the knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments and unfathomable his ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who, because of his or who becomes his counselor, or who has first given to him that is mighty and paid back to him. For from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be glory forever. So he says that in verse 33, God has many, many ways to solve a problem. Our job is just to believe God that he will help me with my problem. So God used the Philistine general and said, David, we don't want you. Go home. And this got David out of his dilemma. Let's go back to 1 Samuel chapter 28. The next thing I want to point out, that when chaos is ruling, here's my point. When chaos is king, double-mindedness compounds the problem. Let's look at verse 3 and verse 7. Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had lamented him and buried him at Ramoth in his own city. And Saul had removed from the land those who were mediums and spiritualists. Verse 7. Then Saul said to his servants, seek for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, behold, there is a woman who is a medium at Endor. You see, because of Saul's continuous rebellion, God would not answer his prayers anymore. So no matter how hard he tried, he could not get the help of the Lord. Somewhere along the way, Saul removed all of the witches and the medium, the spiritualists, from the land. Probably because it helped him in the political poll. It made him look good. But because God will not answer his prayer and give him any direction, he says, I got to know. I got to know what to do. I got to know what's going to happen. So he went to the witch at Endor. Now, there are several different definitions for the word double-mindedness. And I want to use the definition in this today, is a person who has a responsibility, but at heart is not really in it. You see, he removed the witches, but in a time of great distress, and he can get no help from God, there's only one witch left, and he goes to her. He is double-minded. And double-minded adds to the chaos. Not long ago, there was an elementary school in the state of Illinois that passed out flyers to all the children in the elementary school. And the flyer was inviting children to an after-school Satan club. It's hard for a Christian group to do something like that. They get turned down. But a double-minded society will do things that they really do not back it up with. Now, I've hit the Democratic Party fair and honest, without any apology. Now, I want to hit Republicans. What is a rhino Republican? A rhino Republican is a double-minded person. He says one thing, but his heart is not really in it. Let me give you an example. Let me name 3 names: Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and Mitt Romney. In the last election, those 3 men were up for vote for re-election. All 3 of them, it was almost guaranteed they were going down in defeat. All 3 of them. They came to Donald Trump and they begged him to campaign for them to help him to get reelected. He did, and they got reelected. How did they show their appreciation for the man that saved their jobs? All 3 of them stabbed him in the back. All 3. Double-mindedness. Herschel Walker just won the Republican primary for the office of Senate in Georgia. He ran on a very conservative campaign. He appealed to the Christians, and he won the primary very easily. Shake your head if you saw him the night he had his acceptance speech of winning the primary. Did you see how he ended his speech? At the very end, he holds up 2 hands, making a satanic symbol. And he asked the question, "Are you ready, Georgia?" And there's somewhere in there's a lot of double-mindedness. Keep your eye on Herschel Walker. You cannot have it both ways. Now let's turn to the book of Exodus for a moment, and I want to show double-mindedness in the church of God. Exodus 42. I'm sorry.
Chapter 40.
Exodus 24. Exodus 24. Exodus 24. Now we want to keep our eyes on 2 young, upcoming spiritual leaders in the church of God in the desert. Here we go. Then he said to Moses, Exodus 24, verse 1, "Come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu." Those are 2 sons of Aaron, "and 70 of the elders of Israel, and you shall worship at a distance." And then I'm going to skip down to verse 5. "And he sent young men of the sons of Israel, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrifices, young bull, as peace offerings to the Lord. So who are the young men that offered the sacrifices? And only the priest's family can do this. They are the two sons mentioned in verse 1. God's hand is on Aaron and on Aaron's two sons, Nadab and Abihu. And Aaron steps aside. Rather than performing the sacrifice, he lets his two young men, who will follow him one day, in performing the worship before the Lord. So they are upcoming men in the family of God. Now let's go to the book of Leviticus and let's follow these two young men. That's the next book, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Let's go to chapter 10. Verse 1. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took their respective fire pans, and after putting fire in them and placed incense on it, and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. These two young men who were dedicating themselves to serve the Lord, now God kills them. Now let's continue with this story. Verse 3. Moses said to Aaron, "It is what the Lord spoke, saying, by those who come near me, I will be treated as holy, and before all the people, I will be honored." God says, if you want to be my children, I expect you to be holy. So Aaron therefore kept silent when God made that statement. Verse 4. Moses called out to Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Aaron's uncle Uzziel, and said to them, "Come forward, carry your relatives away from the front of the sanctuary to the outside of the camp." So they came forward and carried them, still in their tunics, to the outside of the camp, as Moses had said. Then Moses said to Aaron and to his son Eleazar and Ithamar, that's two more sons of Aaron, two are died, two are living, "Do not uncover your heads, nor tear your clothes, so that you may not die, and that you may not become wrathful against all the congregation. But your kinsmen, the whole house of Israel, shall bewail the burning which the Lord has brought about them." He killed them with fire. That's what the burning is talking about. They were double-minded. These young men were doing the work of the Lord, but their heart was not in it. So they thought they could do it their way. They altered God's plan. And God says, if you're going to serve me, you're going to be holy. I will not put up with that. So he killed them while they were performing their duties. And then they took the men out and they buried them, still in their work clothes. And then God says, I don't want you to cry, and I don't want you to go to the funeral. I want you to keep yourself holy. Now let me say something here that we may probably ought to do some meditation on. Are there some people, when they die, that we should not go to their funeral? Are there some people who live so wicked that we do not go and pay respect for? Would there ever be occasion to say, I cannot honor that man's death by my presence? We need to meditate on that, because we draw principles from the Old Testament. Now, I want to continue on for a moment on this idea of double-mindedness. Now, let me get your attention. There will be no service in this church for the next 3 Sundays. There will be no service next Sunday because my bones will be hurting. You say, well, how do you know? Because my bones hurt 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So I'm just going to take next Sunday off. There will be no church service 2 weeks from today, because Linda and I have been invited to a baby shower. And we have to travel some distance to get there, so we're just not going to go to church. There will be no service here 3 weeks from today, because we're going to one of our best friends' anniversary celebration. So we're just going to close church down. Now, I use humor to get a point across. See, in those 3 statements, I am saying I am double-minded. I have a responsibility, but my heart is not in it. Now, when will Jesus be proud of us? He will be proud of us when we come to the place and we say, other people will not program my life. Jesus is the Lord of my life, and I will not be double-minded and flopping back and forth. Now, when we come to that place, He will be proud of us. So I use humor there to illustrate my point of double-mindedness. My time is running out. So next week, we're going to be wrapping this up. And the title of next week's sermon is, Was Saul a Christian?